You said something at dinner. Maybe it was a joke that landed wrong, or a response you gave too quickly, or a moment where you went quiet when someone expected you to speak. The conversation ended hours ago. Everyone else has moved on. But you're still there. Still in that room. Still replaying every word, every pause, every facial expression, trying to figure out what it all meant, what you should have said instead, whether they left thinking differently of you. It's midnight. Maybe later. And your mind refuses to let it go. If this is you, you are not alone. And more importantly, you are not broken. What you're experiencing has a name, a psychological framework, and perhaps most importantly, a reason. Understanding that reason is where your healing begins. This pattern of replaying conversations, of mentally rewinding and re-examining social interactions long after they've ended, is closely tied to what psychologists call rumination. But it goes deeper than just overthinking. For many people, this nightly mental replay is the brain's attempt to do something it feels it never got the chance to do in the moment, to feel safe, to feel understood, and to feel in control. The mind goes back not because it is punishing you, but because some part of you believes that if you analyze it enough, you'll find the key that makes everything okay. That's not weakness. That's a nervous system that learned, somewhere along the way, that the world required your constant vigilance to survive. To understand why some people do this and others don't, we have to go back, usually all the way to childhood. Children who grew up in environments where their words were frequently misinterpreted, criticized, or dismissed often learned that communication was dangerous territory. When what you said could lead to punishment, rejection, or conflict, your mind began treating every social interaction as something that needed to be reviewed, adjusted, and perfected. You became a student of your own speech, analyzing your words for errors the way a lawyer reviews a contract, because the consequences of getting it wrong once felt enormous. That hypervigilance doesn't disappear when childhood ends. It follows you into adulthood, into every room, every relationship, and every quiet moment before sleep. There's also a deep connection between this pattern and anxiety, particularly social anxiety. For people living with anxiety, the brain's threat detection system, the amygdala, is often working in overdrive. It doesn't just register physical dangers, it registers social ones. A raised eyebrow from a colleague. A friend's tone that felt slightly flat. A pause that lasted a second too long. These signals get flagged as potential threats, and when the day is over and the distractions fall away, your brain begins processing them. This is why the replaying almost always happens at night. The quiet removes every buffer between you and your unresolved internal world. There is nothing left to distract you from what your mind has been quietly holding all day. What makes this particularly painful is the specific shape these replays take. It's rarely a neutral review. Instead, the mind gravitates toward the moments of perceived failure, the thing you said that might have sounded arrogant, the pause where you should have been funnier, the disagreement where you weren't articulate enough. You play prosecutor, witness, and defendant all at once. And the verdict is almost always the same: you fell short. You should have done better. You wonder what they really think of you now. This inner courtroom is driven by something psychologists refer to as the negativity bias, the brain's evolutionary tendency to give more weight to negative experiences than positive ones. It was a survival mechanism for our ancestors. Remembering what went wrong helped them avoid danger. But in modern social life, this same mechanism causes your mind to latch onto the one awkward moment in an otherwise perfectly fine conversation and treat it as the defining truth of the entire interaction. You forget the laughter. You forget the warmth. You replay the stumble. For many people, this pattern is also deeply connected to a fear of abandonment or a fragile sense of self-worth. When your value as a person feels contingent on how well you perform in social situations, on whether people like you, approve of you, or find you impressive, every conversation becomes a kind of audition. And every audition carries the risk of rejection. So the replaying becomes a protective behavior. If I can just figure out what went wrong, I can fix it before they leave. If I can just understand their reaction, I can know whether I'm still safe. The mind replays not to torture you, but to protect you, even when the protection itself becomes the pain. What this does to your body and your well-being over time is significant. Chronic rumination is associated with elevated cortisol levels, disrupted sleep, and a heightened risk of depression. When your brain spends hours each night in a state of low-grade threat response, it never fully rests. You wake tired not because you didn't sleep enough hours, but because your mind was working through the night, solving problems that may not even exist. The exhaustion is real. The emotional weight is real. And it accumulates. Relationships are affected too, in quieter ways. When you live inside your own replays long enough, you begin to make decisions based on the story in your head rather than the reality in front of you. You might pull back from a friend because you convinced yourself, in a midnight replay, that they're annoyed with you when they aren't. You might over-explain yourself in conversations, apologizing preemptively for things no one noticed. You might avoid certain people or situations altogether because the emotional cost of the post-conversation processing feels too high. In trying to protect yourself from rejection, you sometimes slowly create the very distance you feared. But here's what I want you to hold on to: the fact that your mind does this is not evidence that something is wrong with you. It is evidence that you care deeply about connection, about being understood, about showing up well for the people in your life. The capacity for this kind of reflection is also the capacity for enormous empathy. People who replay conversations are often the ones who notice when others are hurting, who choose their words with care, who remember the small details of what someone shared months ago. The same sensitivity that keeps you up at night is also one of your greatest gifts. Healing doesn't mean turning that sensitivity off. It means learning to offer yourself the same understanding you so freely extend to others. It means catching the replay when it starts and asking, would I put a friend through this same cross-examination? It means practicing what therapists call cognitive diffusion, the ability to notice a thought without being consumed by it, to see the replay as a story your mind is telling rather than an objective truth. It means building, slowly and deliberately, a safer relationship with your own inner voice. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is learning to interrupt the replay with a single, quiet question: what is the most likely reality here? Not the worst-case interpretation your anxiety has constructed, the most likely one. Most people are too absorbed in their own inner world to have analyzed your words the way you have. Most awkward moments are forgotten by everyone except the person who lived them most intensely. You are allowed to let the conversation end when it ends. You are allowed to close the day without a verdict. You are allowed to trust that you are enough not because you performed perfectly, but because you showed up, and that has always been enough. The night doesn't have to be a courtroom. With time, with compassion, and with the right understanding of why your mind works the way it does, it can become something quieter. Something closer to rest.